Hello, it's story time. Well, today I'm going to read you a story I wrote in 2014. It's called The Green Knight Terraforming Company, Case 1. Now, the reason I'm telling stories today is that when I was a little girl, that was my job. When my mother was canning or baking bread or doing important things that mothers do. And at the time, we didn't have a television, so I would sit down in the middle of the kitchen and read out loud. And actually, I thought I had the best job because I loved to read. So anyway, today I'm reading one of my stories. It's called The Green Knight Terraforming Company, which I said before. I did have this published on Amazon, but there was a problem with when I tried to put it up there. So I have taken it off, and I'm reading it to you today. The super white flying van with the green logo, the Green Knight Terraforming Company, painted on its side, zipped over the tree and landed on the pavement in front of a large concrete and metal warehouse. I stepped out of the van wearing my company clothes, khaki trousers, white polo shirt with a Green Knight logo on the right pocket. A short, dwarfish, wrinkled humanoid waited for me to reach the warehouse. As soon as I reached smelling distance, a strong cheese-like smell wafted from the humanoid. I pressed a button on my dark-rimmed glasses to turn off the smeller. With my nose quit smelling, the green taste disappeared from my mouth. I coughed a little and strode toward the humanoid. The humanoid started speaking. I assumed it was male because of the low voice. I adjusted a knob next to my ear so that the translator worm would start translating. At the end of the knob, a small hammer knocked the worm into the right dialect. The humanoid began speaking again, and I almost wished I couldn't understand it. "Your terraforming didn't work," he whined. "What do you mean it didn't work?" I looked around at the trees around the parking lot and the warehouse. The trees were earth-like. Roses twined around trellises attached to the building, and birds were chirping in the distance. Our motto, "You travel the stars, we make you feel at home," seemed to be working in this case. I checked a box on my checklist. Just to make sure that I was right and the customer in this case, a brie-smelling humanoid, was wrong. I glanced at the grass, the flowers, the trees, and the rest of the terraformed area. It looked right. It sounded right. And when my nose was on, it even smelled right. So what was the problem? "Touch the grass," said the humanoid. From his expression of dissatisfaction, I assumed the worst. Even so, I reached down to touch the blue-green grass. Two of the grasses grew longer, grabbed my wrist, and pulled me to the ground. I tried to break away, but the grasses began to grow around my legs, my chest, and my arms. It felt like steel bands holding me down. That's what's wrong. I wished I could shut down the humanoid's voice. "I lost a lot of workers to that cannibal grass when they tried to trim it." I could almost hear a smirk in his voice. "Help," I whispered into the microphone, implanted into my tooth as I panicked. The grass poked my nose and mouth as if it was trying to get in. When help arrived, the grasses had covered my entire body, my ears, and one eye. I was completely gagged and couldn't move an inch. I felt the vibrations of the humanoid running towards the safety of the building when I heard a whoosh. Dang. My partner in crime, Donald, we called him Donald because he reminded us of that old-time cartoon Donald Duck, was standing on the sidewalk with a flamethrower in his hand. He gave me a hand up. I checked my face. Yep, I was missing an eyebrow, and probably would have to regenerate an eye. The khaki pants and polo shirt were still in pristine condition. One of our secrets in the complaint department was that we wore armor for any occasion. The burned grass was a perfect silhouette of my body. Before I could take a deep breath, Donald scooped a specimen of the dirt that was now exposed. Good thinking on his part. "Am I still burning?" I asked Donald. The humanoid was peeking through the door. I wasn't sure, but was he laughing? I didn't bother to tap the earworm. I didn't want to hear that laughter at my expense. Tiny? Okay, I was over 6 feet tall, and my co-workers were not very original in their nicknames. Joe, I responded back. I refused to accept that nickname. If you turn on your smeller, you'd know. I hated it when my co-partner and co-alien was more practical than I was. I turned on the smeller. From the ashy smell, I had finished all the burning I was going to do. I hurriedly turned it off. Combined brie and ash was not a pleasant smell. Donald and I left the alien, who was bent 90 degrees and was holding his stomach. I ignored him and got into the van. Before I turned my smeller back on, I'd need a new ash-free uniform, a bath, and a regenerated eye. My skin wasn't doing so well either. Donald could test the soil to see if the terraforming software geeks had forgotten to put in an important amino acid. The diligent earworm started translating the humanoid's laugh while I was pulling out singed hair from my scalp. I gave the earworm knob a tap and heard a scream. I would have to get a new earworm to replace this one. If I wasn't careful, our earworm colony would refuse to work with me. I probably didn't need a translator to know what our customers' complaints were. I had heard them all. I used words under my breath that even Donald couldn't translate with his earworm. It was a good thing we had bought a small lab with lab animals. The small spaceship opened its portal and we bounced on the landing pad. I didn't let Donald pilot the flying van. He had lost his license in the crash of 2130. From what information I could find, including not friends of Donald's, the crash earned him a lifetime ban from flying land cars to spaceships. The lab animals were waiting for us at the landing pad. One of the bunnies, with a black spot on the side of his white coat, was jumping 3 to 4 feet. "Where's the sample? Where's the sample? Where's the sample?" he chanted as he jumped. My only problem with techies, especially lab animals, is that they are so wired that it's hard to get them to listen. Finally, he took the small sample and jumped from the bay. "What did you do to my earworm?" said the other lab animal, a hamster about the size of an earth dog. Seriously, as a human, I am at a disadvantage when it comes to the techies. They have telekinesis, telepathy, and any other tele you can think of. So I shouldn't be surprised when I do something bad and that the news is all over the spaceship before I even get there to tell my side of the story. I didn't try to explain. I just handed over the earworm. "At least you didn't kill this one," said the hamster. I called her Hammy. "Yeah, I get dirty looks, so what?" "Ermy will need a long rest. You better be more careful with the next one." Donald snickered. He waddled out of the landing area after the rabbit. I slunk out to the medical bay. The leech there would want to get started on the regeneration. I could clean up afterwards and get a good sleep. Yes, that is my extent of 5-syllable words until I pull out my chip and consult my dictionary. Plants can be very literal and make good librarians. So, it's all fun and games until there is a problem. I was still in my ashy, smelly green night uniform when the rabid rabbit called me into the lab to look at the dirt sample. I leaned over the microscope and murmured that, "Yep, it looked like a piece of dirt to me." "So what am I looking at?" I asked the rabbit. His long ears were stuffed into a puffy plastic hat, which made him look like a mushroom. The rabbit gave me a hard look that didn't go well with its natural fluffiness. Look again. He tried to growl, but it only came out as a squeak. With a long, suffering sigh, I put my eye on the eyepiece of the microscope and kept looking until I could see something waving against the sample glass. The rabbit smirked when I looked up. Then he put the microscope on a higher magnification and put the visual on a holographic screen. Dang. I checked my image in the mirror to make sure I didn't have a black permanent mark around my eye. The rabbit had done that before. Sure, the rabbit smirked. I didn't trust his fluffiness. No, Tiny. He pulled my pant leg so that I would face the holographic image. See that finger? Heck, the piece of dirt looked like it was giving us a finger. Can you fix it? I watched the finger wave vigorously like it could see us and wanted us to see it. I mean, with those AA things? You mean amino acids. I knew the rabbit could see my eyes go blank. Research was not my thing. I was there to handle complaints and, if necessary, handle the war. Lab animals were for that other stuff. The rabbit sighed. He scratched the top of his head through the puffy plastic hat and then answered, The amino acids won't do a thing for this problem. It might just anger the civilization that is giving us the finger. Okay, that was bad. We had a terraforming planet that had gone bad, possibly tons of money to get back to the cheesy, smelly humanoid, and a miniature civilization that could take us into the interplanetary court if we continued to kill off their planet and substitute it with our gene sequences. I could feel a headache begin at the back of my head, and it was spreading to the front. I thought we did tests on every planet before terraforming. I chewed my nails. They didn't taste very good. Oh yeah, turn on the smeller. They still didn't taste very good, but it was better than chewing the tables and chairs. The other lab animal, Hammy, typed something into a terminal that was next to the lab equipment. She cleared her throat. Just filled the papers with our company showing that there was no natural citizens of planet XV1 Saturn XX111. Then it isn't our problem? If you say so, boss. I hated when Hammy said that. It meant that I was either too dumb to live or hadn't thought it through, so I tried again. We file the papers and let the interplanetary officials take care of the rest. If you say so, boss. I was getting tired of this. Spit it out, Hammy. It says right here in the interplanetary code that we are just as responsible as Risht for killing a sentient civilization with terraforming. Oh, heck. The headache was full-blown. Get one of the earworms to contact the civilization. We need some communicating and some negotiating. Do we have anyone to negotiate? Hammy smiled. The smile looked sinister and not at all innocent. Just you, boss. I eventually took a shower. Well, not so much a shower as air jets that sterilized my skin and poofed me with Hawaiian fresh breezes. We had run out of the manly scents about 2 trouble calls back. At one of our stops, the customers had been so riled that we had to bribe them with some of our toiletries. It's hard to get good toiletry when you are deep in space. I came out of the shower smelling like a fresh Venus brothel maid, ready for some action. Since the air scrubbers, little muscle creatures that like to roam the vents, had spread the smell throughout the spaceship, none of the lab animals or piloting drones remarked on my fresh scent. The customers wouldn't remark on the smell because they would think it was some strange ritual only used by humans on Earth. I snookered a lot of citizens with my Earth-human excuse. There were a lot of strange ideas about Earth humans, that we were warlike, aggressive, and liked our war weapons. Okay, they might be right, but the Cosmos citizens believed that someone who could defend himself was from a barbaric culture. I believe that offense was the best defense, which is why I was sent on the worst complaint calls, the trouble calls that would find me running from natives or talking to the Interplanetary Council. Hammy was recording the conversation between the miniature village and the earworm. It sounded like nonsense to me, and I said so until Hammy told me politely to shut up. Apparently, the earthworm was translating to earwormese so that the earworms could talk to the microscopic creatures. Apparently, we were too big and too clumsy to be loud in the conversation. Hammy would run the translation to basics so that I could get the gist of what was being said. Finally, Hammy handed me an old-style handheld monitor so that I could see the earwormese and the basic translation side by side. The first few pages were insults and threats. Compared to these microscopic critters, the Earth humans were pacifists. I admired the language, and when I asked Hammy how to say some of the words, she shushed me. I would have to get together with a speechwriter because your mama is rotten feces and your daddy screws chlamydia bacteria was the least creative phrases in the bunch. Some of the threats I couldn't even understand, although the long-eared rabbit vomited in a trash bag after hearing that one. Good thing that we had a good quality gravity machine. 0G would have not been pleasant for me or the rest of the home team if there was vomit floating around. The last bit of the translation was actually, "You blank, blank, clumsy oaf. You're killing our home." I got that one, so what to do? When the earworm and the earworm council got to the negotiations, I shut them down. No, they were not going to use the humanoid Donald or myself as building materials to repair their old world. They were not cannibalistic, really, just like the meat on our bones. It was a no. We would have to find another way to appease them. If the creatures calling themselves the people, as if that was unusual, had just wanted the humanoid, I would have pulled out the chainsaw and cut him up in bite-sized pieces. After the conference with the people, I went to my bunk and sat down. Yes, I was the leader of the little outfit, but the quarters were so small that we had to double bunk. The only one who would even stay in my proximity for any length of time was Donald. He waddled into our bunk area as I was trying to come up with a solution. We could finish killing an advanced civilization, kill the humanoid that put us in this position, or throw ourselves on the mercy of the Interplanetary Court. I left about the word mercy. What a nice touch. Oh no, I wasn't going to go through the last option. No way in hell. It was a good thing that Donald sat down beside me and tapped my arm. I shook him off. Boundaries. Donald didn't have any boundaries. His nose was beak-like, another reason why I called him Donald, and he began to murmur. "Speak up, man." Okay, technically he wasn't human, but from all accounts he was a man. Wink, wink. I put my intention on his words instead of my thoughts and stared at the poster I had glued to my small locker. A big bazonga woman in a bikini. It kept me calm. If the creatures are microscopic, Donald began slowly, they are, then the entire grass area has to be a huge civilization. He paused to gather his thoughts. He tapped on my arm again, but I ignored it. I felt he was onto something. Then if they are warlike as they sound, then they're not one civilization, but a bunch of warring tribes, I shouted. "Donald, you are a genius!" I slapped him hard on the back, and he fell off the bunk with a crash. I leaped, hollered, and raced to the lab. Only the rabbit joined in the celebration. He didn't have a clue what I was celebrating. But you know rabbits. They flee, or they jump. Hammy gave me some classic dirty looks. I was used to them by now. "What's going on?" she asked. "I have a plan," I said. In my last leap, I bumped into the beaker. The rabbit was able to make the last-minute grab before it crashed to the floor. I grabbed the table to stabilize myself, and if the microscope hadn't been bolted to the table, I would have been on the floor next. Hammy gave me another sit down or I'll beat you with a cabbage look. I sat down. Except for our pilot drones, the rest of the crew, including all the earworms, were either in the lab or crowding into the lab. I guess that my bouncing caused either consternation or hilarity, depending on the species. Even the moth filters were gathered around the air vents to find out what other stupid Earth human shenanigans I would perform. My next job would be clown for the interplanetary parties. I'd be a big hit. So I laid out the plan. It would involve several earworms, some telepathy, and a cage for the humanoid if it decided to run. I suspected that the humanoid would have to run by now if it thought that we were even a little bit capable of discovering its scam. I couldn't believe that the humanoid was innocent. He had been too insistent to have that small piece of the planet terraformed. We did large and small terraforming projects, but they were usually bigger than 10 acres on a supposedly desolate planet. Excuse me. Instead of swooping down in front of the warehouse in the white flying van and parking in the convenient parking lot in the front of the warehouse, Donald and I landed on a landing pad that was strategically placed on top of the warehouse. Donald was holding onto the oh shit strap and trying not to scream. We had done a survey of the terraformed area, something we should have done before I blithely went to the first trouble call. I kept my smell button on because I wanted to know where the humanoid or humanoids were hiding. It was hard to hide from my smeller when it had gotten a full scent of brie. No, don't ask. My grandmother wasn't a bloodhound. That might be acceptable on other planets, but on Earth the apes keep to themselves. Compared to the lab animals and pilot drones, Donald and I were brutes. This was the part of troubleshooting that I liked best. When the diplomatic and lab work broke down, it was time for some shooting gallery-like action. Donald was considered a wuss on his planet because he hadn't trained on heavy gravity for years. But when compared to that stick-thin humanoid, he was their worst nightmare. He carried the grenade launcher. No, we don't kill the customers. That is just bad business. But when they want to scam us out of our hard-earned money and put us through the ringer, we just like to make them pay with a little skin. The last time Donald and I had fun with grenades, we had to clean up the mess. Body parts flying everywhere, and the cleanup, well, let's say that blood is a bitch to get out of most materials. We use smoke grenades now. If the humanoid needed to breathe, then we had him. If he didn't need to breathe, we were up shit creek. We found the hatch and crawled down the skeletal stairway, listening for some sound or smell that would tell us where the humanoid was hiding. The warehouse had dim lighting, which made me thankful that I had let the rabbit give me new modifications in my regenerated eye. The regenerated eye was a ninja night vision eye. I tapped my temple. It killed my normal vision and turned on my night vision, which killed my depth perception. Geez, there's always a little bad mixed with the good. We crept down the stairs, and at the ground floor we looked for the normal warehouse equipment. It was bare. Old Mother Hubbard bare. Okay, that is an earth poem that had been kept in the family, which what it meant was that the warehouse was bare. There was a pulsing light from a doorway at the back. The memory and the strong cheese smell came from the light in the doorway. With the warehouse bare, I didn't have to worry about bumping into shelves or boxes. I slid through the darkness toward the light. Donald watched my back. His head swiveled back and forth from the stairs to the exits that were clearly marked in BASIC. I don't know who the humanoid expected. It might even have been a setup for us. So far, the humanoid had been several steps ahead of us. I had a gnawing feeling and tasted a little bile in my mouth. It was a sure sign he was ready for us. Still, I was drawn to the light like a moth to the flame. Donald kept the lab techs and drones in the loop. He was the comms and backup in this op, with his big telepathy brain of his. When I reached the door, I didn't step into the light at first. I wanted to get a sense of what was going on in there. My earworm started translation when I gave him a slight tap. Ermi was back in my ear. He had requested this assignment. I would have preferred a less tired earworm, but Ermi was the only one to volunteer. You take what you can get sometimes. Ermi stated his translation. Tell me where the shh is, growled the humanoid. Never, never, said High Squill. Yes, Ermi used the tags. He doesn't have enough range to change the voices. Still, he could have done better than monotone. It made the humanoid sound like a villain from a pulp fiction novel. I will sterilize you, your family, your city, hell, the entire planet, yelled the humanoid. Ermi translated some of the insults that we heard in the lab from the piece of dirt. Donald had better remember those insults because later I would be picking his brain for the exact wording. I didn't have time right now to memorize them. I slipped through the door. The humanoid, dang amateur, had his back to the door and was looking at a holographic image. The image was pretty familiar, a piece of dirt making a marvelous representation of a third finger. By God, the way they were waving around, I had to be impressed. The breach he smelled became even smaller. I was getting a slight hint that the strength of the humanoid smell had something to do with his emotions. The cheesier he smelled, the darker he was getting. I tapped my temple to get back to normal vision. The humanoid grabbed a beaker that contained a piece of dirt, using tongs, of course. The Bunsen burner already had a flame. I leaped across the lab and punched the humanoid in the face. As the beaker dropped, I caught it. A first time for everything, and placed it carefully on the laboratory bench. Then I started a beat down on the slight humanoid. My earworm got into the adrenaline rush fun by screaming, or he might have been translating the humanoid scream. I don't remember which. The scream quit a few minutes later after I hit the humanoid a few times. By then, the screaming earworm had burst my eardrum. Finally, Donald pulled me off the skinny, smelly villain. I threw a bill on his body. Your contract has been canceled. I stomped on the finger that reached for the bill and skedaddled out of the room. There should have been some cheering when I opened the warehouse front door, but once again, Earth-human antics just don't go over well with the Cosmo crowd. The Green Knight Terraforming Company hated to lose customers, but after they received the report about the humanoid's antics, canceling with extreme prejudice was endorsed. This time. It helped that our earworms and lab techs were able to contact the different microscopic tribes. We lost one customer and gained 40 more, with an exclusive contract to terraform the rest of the planet. They even gave us the land and property that contained the former villain's warehouse. The humanoid now has new accommodations in the planetary prison system. And that metal element or organic compound he was trying to steal? Well, we're now the sole distributor of it. I even have a small statue in my honor in some courtyard of some microscopic family in saving their husband and father. So, on to the next complaint. They don't always end this well.